to everyone for yet another discussion on Talking Films Online. Talking Films Online, or TFO in short, is an informal coming together of academics, students, researchers, filmmakers, and cinephiles interested in cinema. More importantly, interested in talking and writing about cinema. The online group came together quite spontaneously during the pandemic and lockdown in June 2020. Geeta Vishwanath from Baroda and Nikhila, that's me from Hyderabad, have been coordinating the activities of TFO since its inception, with people like Sanjay Kumar, Sridhar K, Madhavi Ravi Kumar, Phaniraj, Ajanta Sarkar, Murli Krishna, Tarakeshwar VB, Yagnashri, Rasha, Madhurima, Pradnya, Vijay Borati, and many others who join the weekly discussions and enhance the quality of the discussion. So far, TFO has organized 237 weekly online discussions. In fact, this is the 238th one, which include weekly discussions on a pre-decided film, besides a few month-long film festivals. For instance, last September, TFO had organized a Kannada movie month where filmmakers such as Prithvi Konanur and Srinidhi Bengaluru and screenplay writer Ananta Chandreya joined the discussion. Filmmakers often make available their films exclusively for TFO members to watch by generously sharing links to their films. And we've had first-time filmmakers such as Bani Singh and Kling Johnson, as well as well-known auteurs such as Deepa Dhanraj, Jayant Cherian, Girish Kasarwalli, Adur Gopal Krishnan, Aparna Sen, Anjali Montero, and KP Jayashankar, etc., join the discussion of their respective films. Geeta and I have documented the weekly activity of TFO as an article titled Cinephilia to Creating a Living Archive of Film Discussions in the book Politics of Curatorship, Collective and Affective Interventions, edited by Monia Akhiari and Philip Rencius, which was published in 2023. During June every year, to mark its anniversary, TFO organizes the smartphone short film competition for students between 18 and 25 years of age, and the winners are awarded prizes. This year, please note that May 15th is the last date for sending films. Please inform your students and friends. On September 30th and October 1st last year, TFO organized the first international seminar on Indian cinema in the digital era, Continuities and Discontinuities, in collaboration with Forum on Contemporary Theory, Baroda. The aim of TFO is to get a conversation going around cinema and to get as many people involved in the process as possible. With the weekly events being online, anyone and everyone interested in cinema is welcome to TFO. TFO has a WordPress blog where all kinds of writings on cinema are encouraged. TFO's YouTube channel is called Talking Films Online, and you can watch some of the discussions that have happened on TFO platform. TFO has a private group on Facebook. There's a WhatsApp group. We have now a Telegram channel, and also we have an Insta page. So this is where the posters with the film links for discussion and the Zoom links are also posted. As we all know, May is the month of Cinemability, where we will have back-to-back discussions on films that problematize ableism. Cinemability is curated by Samvartha and Aravinda Bhatt. We have two discussants this week again for the film Temple Grandin, Shreya and Adishri Singh. Shreya is a first-year student at Manipal Center for Humanities. She's interested in pursuing her major in sociology with a minor in international relations. Her interests in film and media primarily revolve around the coming of age and thriller genres. Her hobbies include dancing, photography, and listening to indie pop music. Adishri Singh is a first-year student at Manipal Center for Humanities. She's interested in pursuing a degree in history. Her academic interests also include geopolitical research. Her interests lie primarily in animation and graphic novel sphere and with respect to books and film. Very warm welcome to both of you, and it's now over to Shreya. You can come in, Shreya.
Thank you for the introduction, Nikhila. We're glad to be part of the discussion this week too. And it's another film that we enjoyed discussing in class along with Arvinda and Samartha. And it's Temple Grandin, which is a 2010 biopic starring Claire Danes as the title character. So Temple Grandin is an autistic woman who became one of the most respected animal behavior scientists in the world, and it follows her life from high school through graduate school and illustrates the challenges that she faces due to her autism and how she was able to develop unique coping mechanisms and thinking strategies that were mostly visual. And it uses innovative, and I think what struck us most about the film was how the cinematic techniques of visual overlays and sound distortions sort of provided us a perspective into what Temple felt on a first person point of view, and helped portray her sort of inner experience and the sensory world, which offered us an audience a window into artistic perception. And this film also explores the social and emotional difficulties which she encountered, her relationship with her mother, teachers, mentors, peers, and even in her professional world, and how she was able to attain success in the livestock industry. The film has been praised for its accurate and empathetic depiction of autism, and Miss Dane's performance was widely acclaimed post its release. Similar to last week, our discussion is again a bit thematic. Um, we've again split it up amongst both of us, and we'd like to talk about her interpersonal relationships while also exploring how disability and autism and visual thinking is sort of brought into the frame. After which, we'll open up discussion with the other panelists here. So over to Adishri to start off with the first couple of themes.
Okay, as introduced by Shreya, the HBO film Temple Grandin, which stars Claire Danes, offers a striking portrayal of autism. It challenges a lot of neurotypical assumptions about cognition, communication, and even emotion, framing the analysis through the lens of disability studies, which is mostly the lens we picked up during our classes. The film becomes a critique of how society constructs and responds to neurological differences. In its depiction of Grandin's early life, early on in the movie itself, there's an evolving cognitive style that the film resists via the model of disability, where autism is viewed as an individual deficit, and rather it adopts a social model which emphasizes structural barriers and misrecognition from the outset. The film refuses the simplistic binary of overcoming disability, and Temple's autism is not necessarily treated as an impediment to be conquered, but rather as a structural condition that shapes her mode of perception. What makes Temple Grandin particularly noteworthy within this sphere is how it translates the perceptual difference into cinematic language. As Shreya talks about, it's a lot via sort of how the film is created. From the outset, the film portrays how Temple thinks in pictures, an idea central to her self-conception and work. And instead of abstract verbal thought, she processes information through concrete sensory-rich images. When someone says a word like shoe, we as the viewer can see Temple recall specific shoes from memory, constructing a sort of mental slideshow of images. Sound design also plays a critical role, where ordinary background noise is heightened and layered and often distorted to reflect sensory hypersensitivity, a hallmark of Temple's experience. The clatter of metal, the hum of fluorescent lights, or even the aggressive sound of chewing in a lot of different scenes is nearly is overwhelming, not only for Grandin but also for the viewer. It's aggressive. In one scene, the simple act of entering a supermarket becomes a sensory overload, where which sort of underlines how daily environments can be hostile to autistic bodies. This aesthetic choice, far from being a mere stylistic choice, constitutes a political gesture. They position neurotypical viewers within the neurodivergent experience, challenging them to experience the world differently. The film also highlights how emotions manifest differently for autistic individuals. Temple's sensory sensitivities, such as aversion to touch and difficulties in social situations, are often misread as a sign of emotional incapacity. However, as the film sort of moves forward, it carefully shows how emotional life is rich and complex, just not expressed through non-normative channels, which is done via the character of Temple Grandin. Claire Danes' performance captures these effective nuances through body language, tone, and visualization rather than facial expressions or verbal expressions. This, I feel, the movie is a critique of how our norms illustrate the importance of expanding or like just the movie in itself, how it illustrates the importance of expanding our understanding of emotional communication within the framework of disability, because we're not just sort of seeing it from Temple Grandin's point of view, but we're also really understanding it from our own selves because of how it's a heightened experience via the formal techniques used within the movie. So we're really in the position of the neuro, like we as the neurotypical, or mostly as neurotypicals, are taking on the role of the neurodivergent. Yeah, over to Shreya.
So apart from the visual world insight or the theme that we kind of picked up on, I think another sort of point of discussion in class was about relationships and how there was some form of resistance that came with Temple's sort of interpersonal relationships that she had with her peers or her mother, and most importantly, Dr. Carlock. So social relationships and professional ascents reveal how support, recognition, and struggle are inseparable parts of people's stories with autism and how they sort of deal with it. And one of the most radical aspects of the film is how it reframes relationships not as mechanisms of cure, but as structures of respect and adaptation. Most models of disability view, again, it to be some form of cure, which we spoke about before. And I think that most relationships that people have with those around them also sort of reflect that kind of rapport that's established, where it's perceived as something that needs to be fixed. But over here, it speaks about how one must sort of adapt their own environment or their relationship with the person who is neurodivergent, in order to create a more flexible and adaptable environment for them. And it's also another point of discussion is how her success is never sort of portrayed as a result of her becoming more normal, and instead it emerges from the willingness of other people around her to engage with her on her own terms. She's never sort of in a place where she's asked to compromise. And again, talking about her relationship with her mother and her science teacher, both of these characters sort of defy the institutional logic of exclusion, which defines much of Temple's early life and early education in her school and her college. Where others see deficit, these are the two main characters in her life who see potential in Temple. But crucially, they do not impose neurotypical expectations on her, and they adapt their teaching methods and offer reassurance emotionally, and sort of take her seriously and take her views into account. And these relationships serve as counterpoints to more sort of coercive and ableist institutions such as her college and the industry, the livestock industry, or the meetings that she had with them, where she's continually marginalized or misunderstood. And it sort of brings in a critique on how social institutions treat people with disabilities. And the film is also lays emphasis on mentorship and maternal advocacy, and complicates the narrative of individual achievement. So Temple Grandin's accomplishments are not entirely solitary triumphs of willpower, but it makes it seem like it's a collective effort where there exists some form of care and patience and a network of people who make that environment more viable for her or easier to navigate in. And it challenges the trope of exceptional autistic genius by sort of contextualizing where her success fell within her sort of social position, within her ecosystem of support, and how there was independence within resistance. So it doesn't sort of sanitize the social hostility which Temple encounters, and it looks at how the industry that she's sort of a part of, the livestock industry, is male dominated. Hence, her difference is not just neurological or in her abilities, but it is also very much so gendered. Hence, there is a link between ableism and sexism in very subtle but incisive, decisive ways, and it's very intentional. And how her sort of authority is constantly questioned, her designs are plagiarized, or her presence in the slaughterhouse in seen as something out of the ordinary, in fact. And yet, rather than retreat or assimilation, she insists on being heard. She insists on making her position. She insists on being seen within that environment. And these scenes of public speaking and such, they're not sort of framed as therapeutic breakthroughs, but as political acts. And they symbolize her sort of assertion of epistemic authority. And even when she speaks about cattle behavior, her knowledge is not anecdotal or sentimental. It's very empirical, it's very tested and innovative and backed scientifically. And by sort of asserting this expertise, she also asserts the legitimacy of her cognitive framework, the way she's able to think, like Adushi spoke about the visual world that she creates for herself, and even how the audience is sort of brought into that visual world. I think it's sort of to understand how social institutions have created this very rigid um, environment around those who are neurodivergent, and how society can often devalue these forms of knowledge which don't align with neurotypical forms of knowledge or neurotypical forms of assessment. So I think her relationship with people and how that has impacted her views on social institutions and our views as an audience on how social institutions are restrictive, and how she's able to exercise her restraint, or how she's able to raise her own voice in such a constrained environment, I think is very, very important while discussing this film.
To conclude, I think Temple Grandin ultimately challenges how we conceptualize disability. Rather than positioning autism as an individual deficit, it exposes social and environmental structures that disable it. As Shreya talked about, that there is an intersectionality of identity, which is something inherent in all of us, and it's a shared experience outside of the neurotypical and the neurodivergent sort of spheres. It asks us, what if the world was organized differently, more flexibly, more empathetically, more imaginatively? What if we did not measure intelligence and capacity according to a single standard? By embodying these questions, both narratively and formally, the film becomes more than just a biopic. It becomes a manifesto for neurodiversity. By the end, the film's transformation is not just narrative, but it's discursive. The players are still the same. The players are still the same, but now they speak. They are spoken to, in ways that reflect their full personhood. Language, once which you could consider a barrier, is more of a bridge now. And in this sort of circular motion where you go from exclusion to recognition, the film insists that true inclusion begins not with changing people, but with changing the world and assumptions that define them. The question is not whether they can understand us, but whether we are willing to understand them on their own terms. I think that's it for Shreya and I. We would like to open the room for discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much, Adishri and Shreya. Thanks for kind of giving us a wonderful overview of the film. We'll now open it out for discussion. Anyone who wants to come in? Yes, Geeta, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Nikhila. And thanks to Shreya and Adishri for initiating the discussion. Of course, it is a very beautiful film and something that, would come under the kind of films that are inspirational. It's also very well made. But my slight discomfiture with it comes from the fact that would it be seen as too easily made into a success story narrative? And we also need to uh, locate her success within the privilege of access to education. And this is something that may not be available uh, to a lot of autistic children. And also, does the film posit her story as an individual's fight against her own disability? And does the neurotypical audience view neurodiversity as something that is worthy of being paid attention to only if it transcends that disability and be absorbed within the larger societal narratives of neurotypicality? So this is a bit of discomfort I had. And another thing is the woman who played the actress who played the role, Claire Danes. She is not an autistic person. She is neurotypical. And of late, there has been this debate, whether uh, quote unquote normal people should play the role of, say, homosexuals or any alternative personality. So that I think is also something that is worthy of being discussed. Thank you.
Yeah, any responses, Adishri or Shreya, to what Geeta is saying? Is there anything that you want to add?
Um, yeah, so definitely I do agree. And while we watched the movie, this was something we discussed in class. But I also do think that the context within which the movie was released is something that needs to be pondered. So it was released in 2010, and at that point, the information or the knowledge that the public had on autism in itself was very minimal. So though I do agree that there are questions about sort of the linearity of the story, and is it a shared experience, and is it really worth only discussing if it's a success story? Is it only is a neurodivergent life matter only if it sort of fits into the ideas of the neurotypical success? But I do think its im- its strength lies in the idea that it was able to sort of show the perspective of, and maybe there are ideas of whether maybe that because there is privilege is a big part of it. She was only able to sort of succeed in life because of the access to resources she had, like um, being able to afford like a private school, or being able to afford teachers who could sort of give individual help to her within that space. But I do think the idea that she was not necessarily fitting into the neurotypical standards. She was sort of going about the neurotypical system. She was navigating via her disability, quote unquote, disability. And really, by the end of it, it wasn't necessarily a um, is she fit to exist in society, rather than, oh, it's a difference in perspective. It's not a wrong perspective. It's a difference in perspective that needs to be taken into account. So, though I do agree that a big part of it is that she was privileged, and there is a certain level of ease that comes with her disability within that context. I do think within that time frame of when it was released and the access to information that the public had, it was a big step. And I think that's something that does need to be taken into account when you're sort of discussing these things, because if you are the first of your kind, you can't necessarily, I know it sounds bad, but you can't necessarily expect like all of these bases to be covered, whether the actors are sort of like whether the neurotypical can sort of represent the neurodivergent. But I do think it's important to take into account that within that context it was a pretty big jump, and it was really something that broke a lot of barriers going forward. And like in the last film we discussed, Championess, we did manage to see a lot of not neurodivergent, but disabled actors who are playing disabled characters. So yeah, share if there's anything you'd like to add.
We'll go to Madhavi and then come back to Shreya. Madhavi is unmuted. Please go ahead, Dr. Madhavi.
Yeah. Thank you, Shreya and Adishri, for that engaging discussion. I really appreciate the insights you offered. Actually, so I have a few questions, and I enjoyed watching this movie. But I thought that uh, you know. I want to ask questions around the politics of representation in this film. Actually, this film foregrounds Temple's achievements and frames her autism through a kind of heroic, inspirational lens. While this is undoubtedly powerful, but I wonder, do you think this lens into what disability scholars called as the superscript stereotypes, where disabled individuals are only valued when they overcome their condition in exceptional ways? Could such framing potentially overshadow the everyday struggles and structural barriers, which are faced by the broader neurodivergent community? It just came to my, while I was watching that. And the other thing I was thinking about questions regarding the film's aesthetic choices. Where they use this visualizations like schematic overlays and sensory distortions to show us how temple thinks and experience the world. Do you think these cinematic devices help neurotypical audiences empathize with autistic perceptions, or do they risk oversimplifying and aesthetizing it for the sake of narrative clarity? So I'm just curious to hear about your thoughts about this. And finally, also, when I look at the gender and disability angle, I thought that Temple Garden's journey is not just about living with autism, but also navigating a highly male-dominated space, agriculture sciences and the meat industry. So, how do you think the film negotiates the intersections of gender and disability in professional spaces? Does it critically engage with the structural sexism and ableism Temple might have faced, or do you feel it focuses more on individual triumph than systemic critiques? So it just came, while I was watching this movie, but I enjoyed watching this movie actually. Yeah, if you want to add anything on this, I'll be more happy.
Yeah, any responses, Adishri or Shreya, to Dr. Madhavi's questions? Many thought-provoking questions, pushing the envelope, asking us to, see the film in terms of particularly the point that she was making about gender, because I too want to come in a little later about that. But Shreya, go ahead. Yeah, if you want to respond.
Yeah, most of my contribution was similar to what Atishi sort of mentioned. I think I personally I don't believe that the film was sort of made to address every single possible solution of to misrepresentation or representation of someone with autism in a particular environment. I think the because it's about a person, because it's biographical, I think by its nature it's tailored to their own very sort of personal experience navigating um, social institutions and sort of barriers set to society. So I think that's, I mean, obviously we can't ignore the position of privilege that she had, like Adushi mentioned, and even her mom mentions that she was able to graduate from Harvard. So obviously it's understood that not everyone with autism is sort of has access to such a position in society. Yet I think so. I think it's best to look at it as a one in many and not sort of representative of many kind of a perspective, is what I sort of held while I was kind of watching the movie, and that made things simpler for me in understanding how that sort of came in, even while understanding gender in how it worked within the livestock industry or within a male dominated sphere. I think that was also a very sort of important point, and I don't think it was definitely sort of individualistic, but it was definitely tailored to her experience because it was biographical. And if Adi wants to add anything, she can go ahead.
Yeah, just to add onto what Shreya said, like I do think, like she's mentioned, it's biographical. It's a lot about not necessarily dismantling social institutions, but rather how you navigate them. And I do think in that gendered experience, it was a really good representation of that. How sometimes you have to inhibit gendered roles, or sometimes you have to really accept them, that there's no sort of real binary, and you have to sort of float between those two to be accepted into society. And I feel like that's a big part of the neurotypical as well as the experience of a woman. I, at least personally, I agreed with it. As someone who does have autism, even though it's lower on the spectrum, I did feel that it was very representative of my experience, especially the idea that autism is very highly sort of characterized by the overwhelming sensations or like overstimulation. I think that's a big part of the experience. And via its film techniques, it was really able to do that. And while I was watching the film and sort of seeing how they really did sort of press into those film techniques and how in a lot of places it was aggressive, I realized that a lot of my peers were able to experience a similar sensation to what I was experiencing on a daily basis. So I think in the representation of the autistic experience, I do think it did quite a good job. I do agree that that position of privilege is something that needs to be understood and checked. But in the idea that it is a biography or it is biotic in nature, you have to understand that there's constraints to where the story can go and what the filmmaker can do, because it's a real life. And you can't really distort the narrative in hopes of sort of representation, because again, it's a biography. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Okay. Yeah, if Dr. Madhavi, you've unmuted. Do you want to come in again?
No, no, no. They are fine with it, I think.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to, kind of bring up 2, 3 other points. In fact, I agree with Adishri and Shreya that I think the film is trying to not just give a perspective, Temple's perspective, but also give us a particular kind of rationale that may not be particularly available to us. I mean, we only see the external manifestation and expression of a particular kind of behavior. What lies behind that behavior? What is the rationale of that? One may not often have access to. And a temple, I thought, provides that kind of a rationale of what is going on and why she does what she does. I thought the film, in that sense, is important, to say that to give a perspective and to give a rationale that may not otherwise be available. But I had 3 other points to make. One, I thought one of the things the film kind of underplays, but is also there, is the mother's achievement as a Harvard graduate, and the sense of kind of shock, the sense of unwillingness to accept that she has an autistic daughter. I think although it doesn't kind of take this up in a very systematic way, but I think this tension is there to begin with. The sheer ability or disability of the mother to, her sheer disbelief that this can happen, and her a sense of denial with what the doctor's diagnosis is. I thought that was a very interesting moment for me in the film. Also, I thought about the absent father. He's simply not there. So I was wondering about that as well. And the last is the point that even Dr. Madhavi was making about how she's navigating her way in a space which is mostly full of men. I mean, she being virtually the only woman in that space. And so at every point of time, when she's kind of going headlong into that space, given our own sense of what might happen next, I thought something terrible will happen to her in terms of how she's looked upon by the men or treated by her. Some way in which I thought she might have to confront her relation with her body and her sexuality. None of that really unfolds. So in that sense, it was kind of a moment where at every point I was anxious for her, but it did not happen. So it's like the film has consciously chosen to keep aside some of these questions relating to how she navigates her space as a woman as a gendered being, in a space that is so decidedly not for her. And she's made to feel that often, but nothing more shameful, within quotes, she's made to encounter. I thought in that sense, the film kind of keeps some of these questions out. So this was my few responses to the film. If Shreya, Adishri, or anyone else wants to come in at this point, you're most welcome. Anything to say?
Nikhila, sorry to come in again. Can I?
Please go
Yeah.
ahead, Geeta.
Yeah. You spoke about the silences in the film about temple sexuality. Another silence in the film is about, uh, temple's positionality within the larger debate of animal rights. I was reading up something, and I believe she is seen in that larger debate as a kind of paradoxical figure, because on the one hand she's very gentle and humane with animals, but then on the other hand she's also a supporter of meat consumption. So I mean, this is not a question or anything, but just passing on what I read. So I believe she's also, although in most of the American states, they still use her method for animal slaughter, but the animal rights activists see her as her position as, rather paradoxical.
Okay, thanks, Geeta. Thanks for bringing this perspective in. Anyone else would like to come in now? Madhurima, Saumya. Tarkeshwar.
Okay, if nobody else is there, see, all of us are imperfect, and in the same sense, artisan person can also be imperfect person. Why I'm saying it is, yes, I do consume meat, and still I would like to be concerned about the way the animals are killed for meat consumption. So why should we see it as a kind of dichotomy? Or if we see it dichotomy, these kind of dichotomies do exist when we take a particular perspective and look at it. So there is no universal perspective from which we can all be coherent or perfect. So in that sense, uh, there is no need to have problems with it, uh, with her. But at a theoretical level, yes, we can say, uh, even in India, we do see that animal activists uh, are more concerned about even small violence to the animals, but they are not concerned about the violence meted to fellow human beings. So, in that sense, uh, it's a contradiction from a particular perspective. So, but we all live with these kind of contradictions in our life. Uh, in that sense, we need not have problem with an individual, but uh, we can see how these discourses have to navigate along with other discourses which exist there too. So in that sense, the movie bringing out these contradictions is fine. And as um, Aditi and then Shreya have discussed, it is a biopic. And because the person is still there and the person owns the copyright on their life, when the film claims that it is based on a person who is living, then it has to be controlled by that person. So you don't have complete freedom to in construction of the plot. So the construction of the plot is also quote unquote is controlled by the author of the life. So in that sense, trying to take objections in terms of how the autism is presented in the movie would be at an academic level problematic, but at activism level you can do raise those things. Thank you.
Okay. Any other points? Any responses? I think today very few people have joined in because of all the confusion regarding the film link. I hope we can sort it out in the coming week because if people don't watch the film, I think they will not have the motivation to join the discussion. So hopefully next week, this confusion should not be there. Yeah, any other points to make? Okay. If there is nothing else to share as your response to this film, I think we'll wind up the discussion now. Thank you all very much. As we know, this whole month we are going to, discuss films curated under Cinemability. So next Saturday we will meet again with another interesting film and a thoughtful, thought-provoking discussion. So see you all next Saturday and have a very good night. Thank you. Thank you all for joining. And thank you especially Shreya and Adishri for doing this 2 weeks in a row. Thank you.
Thank you, Mom.
Thank
for
you.
having
Good
us.
night. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.